Hi, I'm Barb Strike, but I was Barb Vradsky when I started here way back in 1953. My kids were all baptized in this church and they all went to Sunday school. I have a picture of my mom holding me when I was about 7 months, 8 months old. Couldn't find it for this interview, but that's how we started off here. The building was just beginning to be built, I believe. We had a small library room in Blarchmont School, and we attended Sunday school there. That's what I remember from elementary days until about grade 7. We could start CGIT, Canadian Girls in Training here, and the choir started, so things really started going when I was 11 or 12. There was a young person's choir, and we did perform the odd Sunday, and we definitely performed Christmas Eve. So that was a separate group from the main choir.
Joyce Jacobson. I came in 1946, I think it was. I did go to Sunday school before I came to Canada, but then I went to several different churches over the years. Well, we played the choir, went to Grasmere. There were probably quite a fair few. I never really counted them, you know. And like I say, coming back from the bathroom, which was outside, I tripped and bloodied my nose. So of course I got into the little church and can't sing with her. So we just plugged it for a while and it stopped it, and we got on with our concert.
That's right.
They were always so, it was a very small church, but they were always so glad to see us. And they were so generous, you know. After I left the choir, Terry Machin took over, and I guess they were putting on their cantata, and all of a sudden, all the lights went out. And it was, like I say, it was such a tiny church that it wasn't very well lit anyway. You know, we were, I forget what they were doing. I went down to see them. But anyway, they got through it. Somebody held a flashlight for Terry, and he played and thought, what did we do? Well, we just went by, no, my God, I guess. And we got through it.
I have a couple of photos of some of the cantata participants. Like this was taken from 1989, but you can see that the choir is quite large. And yeah, and my mom was the organist for 30 years, so that's taken in 89 as well. And of course, I've got this one as well with Mom just before she retired again with Joyce. So it's very awesome. Like Mom's about 87 there, so 86, 87. So yeah, it was a very special time in the United Church.
We did, yes.
We always had a Queen's tea on in May, where we'd encourage the ladies to wear their hats. And of course, the Scottish tea was always in January. Way back, we used to have a November bazaar, which was a main one for the United Church. It was always about the first weekend in November, which was huge. We started the cookie walk a long time ago, where we could actually participate and, you know, have the kids involved too in little cake walks and things like that. And we started doing a few auctions as well, which were a lot of work, but were really well attended, you know, from, you know, canned fish to all kinds of preserves and other things that people would donate. Those are some of the major ones before the recent ones like chocolate, Purdy's chocolate drives and things like that.
I was in the Anglican Church at one time in England. So, and I've been to the Catholic Church. I've sort of got around, you know. But this was like a family. And of course, all the things that happen to young people, it happened to everybody.
Yes.
And your name?
Heather Smith.
And how long have you been? in Kimberley.
I'm now 72 for 72 years. So my grandparents came here in 1946, and that was just not very long after the war. And then my mom and dad followed them. I was born here in 1950. When I was young, the church was full. Like, I mean, it was. I mean, people went to church. You know, there was no activities on Sunday, you know, no hockey, no skiing, that kind of stuff. So people went to church. That was just what you did.
What do you remember most about church when you were really young?
Well, one of the things I do remember is that we weren't allowed in church. We had to stay downstairs in our classes, and we couldn't go upstairs until after the church service. No kids were allowed in. It wasn't until you were confirmed that you could go in. We had 2 classes and a senior class. The senior class actually was held in what was the food bank.
What can you remember about special services like Christmas and...
I can tell you about a special service at Christmas, for sure, because of course you had a pageant. And I always wanted to be Mary. I never got to be Mary. I had to be a sheep.
A sheep?
A sheep. So I was not, year after year, I never ever got to be Mary. I was always a sheep.
Is there any special minister that stands out?
Probably Barbara. It was a little bit of a thing, not very much. In fact, she had a little box behind the altar so that she could see over it. She was tough, though. She wasn't very diplomatic in a lot of things. So, and actually, she's the person that got me involved in the food bank. She said to me, "Heather, I think you have something to give, and I think you should belong to the food bank, and I think that you should go to their meeting." Okay. And you didn't argue very much with Barbara. You know, she, like I said, she was little, but she was feisty. From that day on, I was very involved. In fact, I went to that meeting because Barbara would have killed me if I didn't. And that was the beginning of my involvement with the food bank, and it accelerated very fast. I volunteered for everything. The only thing I did not do in the church was be a greeter. That's the only thing. It was busy, and I loved it. I loved it.
So the food bank was in the church.
It was in the church basement.
But it wasn't actually part of the church.
No.
It was a separate.
It had been in the church since 1974. I was there 27 years. It was busy. It was good. And I loved every minute of it.
Yeah. If you can think of anything else.
What is an old-fashioned service? Like, I don't understand that. What is that?
We're not quite sure.
Like,
But yeah, we're trying to figure that out, and I think...
It was very long.
it was. Absolutely it was. I mean, the sermon went forever. You know, it probably didn't, but as a young person, they absolutely...
No, we don't.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm Louise Hockley. I was Turner, and I was christened in August of 1947 at All Saints Church, Kimberley. I was very active. I went to Sunday school very often as a young child, and I was active in the junior choir for many years and into the senior choir as I got older and into my teens. The teens sang with all the adults at that point. We had quite an active group then, and I was also a member of the AYPA, Anglican Young People's Association, and we used to do a lot of mixing up with from other churches, go into other areas and have youth activities. Up and down the valley, we'd go to Invermere, or sometimes we made trips to the Okanagan, or they came here. When the hall was first built, We had some activities for the young people there. We had some dances, and it was, it was very active, and there were a lot of young people involved. There was 2 or 3 Sunday school classes. As I reached my early teens, they started us teaching Sunday school at that age. Things have changed an awful lot. There wasn't the worry of, So I started teaching Sunday school about 12 or 13, and I had a very young group, and there was actually three different age groups, Sunday school classes.
Special services like Christmas and Easter, were they much different from how they are today?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
In that there was so many people, you had to go really early if you wanted to get a seat. And as I said, lots of young people involved. There used to be a lot of pageantry and that type of thing. In the 50s and early 60s, we had a minister and his wife that were really, really good with young people. And we used to do an operetta every year. There would be like 30, 40 young people involved in this operetta.
Oh, wow.
We did 2 or 3 of them, and they'd do them on the stage in the hall. At that time, the hall was new. We used to do musical operettas and sing, and it was really a big production, I think just overall, all the activity and the enlarged family that we had, like the church family that we had, and it very much was a second home. I was part of the choir as a junior and as a senior. Our services at that time were very formal. It was called High Anglican, and that it was right next to Roman Catholic, actually, very similar in many ways. At that time, there was a lot of these and thous and that type of language in our service. Many times we didn't understand what we were saying just because it was a foreign language to us, using the old English language. But it was very formal, and the clothing that the ministers and the people that worked in the services was much different, and a lot of male content in the services. Women didn't do the lay reading and they weren't lay ministers. It was all men, and we had boys that were servers. The women, they were the altar guild, prepared the altar for the Holy Eucharist. And other than that, there wasn't a lot of women partaking of the services, other than singing in the choir.
That's interesting.
And making the teas. They'd do the
hospitality.
They did the hospitality. They had sewing circles, and they'd be sewing something, mostly stuff for in the bazaar. When I came back, I was away for a long time, and when I came back to Kimberley, I wasn't immediately active in the church, but when I did get back active, the women were a huge part of it. I would help with Sunday school. We helped do small chores around that needed doing in the church or the hall, and we'd help when there was a bazaar being put on. We didn't work at them, but we did help them with preparation and setting tables and collecting flowers for the tables and that type of thing. My mother always made sure that we would go. We only lived 7 doors down from the church, and there was never a reason we couldn't walk up there.
Definitely, So we are going to start with your names.
Officially?
Yes.
John Clemens Radcliffe.
Jim Ratcliffe, I can remember during the war, my mother taking me with her to church late at night, and it was just the old section of church now there, And that's one memory. Another memory I have is of pouring cement for the new setup, and Carol Fergus would probably tell you that she did the same thing.
Mostly I remember being in a junior choir that Ruth Soderholm ran. She was an elementary school teacher in town, and then later on I had 35 years in the senior choir. It was, all I remember about Sunday school was the numbers, and they were big numbers, like I say. I think it was into the hundreds to 200 something.
What were your special services like Christmas and Easter?
The music was great. We always had good choirs.
One thing is, as a young kid, I remember is the Christmas concerts, and all the classes would do their little thing, you know,
Yeah.
their little act or sing carols or whatever. And I can remember going to those, and they were good. And then there was Santa Claus was there and lots of candy and stuff.
Yeah, same. Jim is just a young fellow, 6 years younger than me.
I actually remember a handful of us joining the church and going to service, and I also remember us taking over a service.
Oh.
Yeah, and the one time I had to give the sermon, so I remember that.
What about church picnics?
I was going to mention that. That was one thing that we had every year, and they were great. And you had, you know, the usual stuff, kids races and stuff and all. I can remember at one time, Carol's dad had he was involved in a bus line here, and him taking a bus load out to Camp Stone, the Boy Scout camp, and full of kids for a picnic, yeah. I remember they always seemed to have a ball game, and of course there was horseshoes and all that stuff. Yeah. We played hooky a few times. Not Jack, but my brother, just older than me, and we could lie like crazy. Yes, we were there. Somebody didn't see you while we sat somewhere else and stuff like that.
My name is Carol Fergus. I was moved to Kimberley in 1945. I was 9 years old. And church had been part of our lives in Trail, where we came from, so it was an automatic that we started coming to church in Kimberley when we got here. Where we lived, and it's still very prominent in this church today, is that our neighbors were the Ratcliffes. So one of the first families we met were the Ratcliffes. There was many other families on that same street that all belonged to the United Church. So it was an automatic thing that Sundays everybody went to church. The upper hall faced onto Deer Park Avenue, and it was just a long single room, I remember. And behind it, there was sort of an office for the minister. You didn't get to go into that. That was sort of like an inner sanctum. But it was very, very plain. And just that big hall. I can remember being part of the church groups, and that was Mission Band, and that was run by Mrs. Lundeen and Mrs. Miller. And then Explorers was run by Pat Betcher. And then there was CGIT after that. Afterwards, when the sanctuary was built, and downstairs in the new lower hall underneath the church sanctuary itself, it was all cordoned off. There was curtains because there was 90 children.
How many?
90 at one point going to Sunday school from every age. And the older you got, the higher you got, so you had your Sunday school up in the tower room. The women poured tea. Of the members of the ladies groups would pour the tea, but the CGIT girls would do all the serving of the tea and sandwiches and whatever. It was so active in those years. Like, it was totally different than we've seen it since 2000. I recall in church, announcement had come down from Cominco that they were going to be cutting back, and we were going to be seeing a closure in a certain period of time. And what we were going to notice visibly was that our younger couples were going to be moving on. It happened drastically. We were, yes, anybody under the age of 55 were pretty well moved on. So it left us with a big gap. So the changing of the times, the economic changes coming through the the mine closing really was a detriment, not only to our church, but to all the churches. For a long time, we had to do a lot of fundraising to meet our budget. And we had a group of people that we would put on dinners, in public dinners, not just for our congregation. Supply entertainment, we would do all kinds of really fun things. I remember especially one spaghetti dinner, and this was in the later years that we were doing. And Peter Johnson and Bill Bale and Jerry Semenchak and everybody was on the stewards, so we were doing this fundraiser. And I said, we had the huge pots, like the huge pots full of spaghetti cooking on the stove. And I said to Peter, I said, do you want to check it to see if the spaghetti's done? He said, sure. So he took it and he threw it against the wall above the stove to see if it would stick or not. And the spaghetti feed was a great success.
Sounds like one we need to bring back.
It was fun. Well, it's been such an important part of my life, whether I'm there working, whether I'm in the sanctuary. It's just the feeling, it's the people, and the community it's made.
That's very special.
And I think that's probably for me, that has been the most, something I'll never forget. Kimberley United has been a very important part of my life, my children's lives, and a lot of my family's lives that are still around. And for us, it's like, it's part of our being.